everybody, and welcome to the Raleigh Music Academy. We're here today with the great John Petrucci from Dream Theater. We thought we would do a short interview with him that will not only be fun, but educational. And today, not really talk so much about hands-on technique, but maybe more about the philosophical nature of playing.
All right. Let's get deep.
Ideas and things that will work in that with that in mind.
Yeah.
So welcome. Thank
you. And this is awesome. So for those of you that don't know, I've known Paul for a long time now, and Paul is my webmaster and website designer, and a good friend, and has really good taste in guitars. I love this collection.
I had help.
It's awesome. So it's great to finally be doing something like this together.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.
Cool.
So I'll go back a little bit and tell a brief story to kind of get you thinking about what I'm thinking about.
Sure.
When we had, we were talking about Guthrie Govan.
Yeah.
One time we had Guthrie here for a workshop.
Yeah.
And we put together a class syllabus for all the instructors.
Mm-hmm.
And he let me pick out whatever I wanted to have him instruct.
Oh, that's cool.
So we had, one of the classes he was supposed to teach was legato technique.
Okay.
Because obviously he's very, very good at it.
Right.
He got up here and he said, I don't really feel like teaching legato today.
Oh, no. Perfect.
So instead,
yeah,
he talked more about ideas and phrasing and musicality.
Right.
And not so much, the exact angle of his pick and his left hand and all of that sort of thing. So it ended up being a more, philosophical sort of class. But I remember specifically that class being one that so many people talked about.
Right.
Being so different and so helpful, as opposed to, we're always spending so much time woodshedding.
Yeah, sure.
So with that in mind, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to start with something that you do on your solo album, something that you do with Dream Theater, and that is odd time signatures.
Right, right.
A lot of people, obviously in Western civilization, we're taught to play everything in 4/4.
Yeah.
It's just, it's what we hear all the time. So with odd time signatures, where do you begin? Where do you start to put together a riff?
Right.
Do you come up with the riff and don't think about time signatures, or do you start with a time signature in mind and develop the riff that way?
Gotcha. Well, first of all, what you had said about Guthrie is really interesting, and I completely relate to that, because there's so many different sources and so much material online where you can just see how a technique is done and pick it up and practice it. But what I find most interesting is how musicians think. Not only guitar players, drummers, vocalists, bass players, keyboard players. Their philosophy behind what drives them, how they maximize their creativity. A lot of times you'll find that technique in itself is actually more derivative from like being a creative person and trying to do something that you're hearing,
Right.
and the technique is sort of like just how you're able to do that, and it's not necessarily so mechanical, like I have to do this and I have to do that. It's like I want to do this, so this is what I need to do to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So that's a great angle to teach from. I think it's really interesting. Along those lines, with odd time signatures, for me it stems from what I'm feeling or hearing musically as I'm playing guitar, and it's more of that and less of here is a mathematical equation of time signatures, and now I'm going to write something. So I think as far as the chicken or the egg, it's the music first, and sometimes that stuff just comes out naturally in an odd time. Sometimes it doesn't. The cool thing about studying that is that when you are creating riffs, and maybe you get it to a certain point, but then you want to make it a little bit more interesting. You want it to turn around in a weird way, or have a little hiccup, or just maybe not be so like stock sounding, then you can use your knowledge of odd time signatures and insert some things that are really cool. And I think it makes for real interesting riffs and musical passages. And the cool thing about that as far as composition is that when you're writing a song and you have something that's a little weird, a little unexpected, and then you do break into a 4/4 section, that 4/4 section feels so grounding and so satisfying. And that's a really cool songwriting technique. And we do that in Dream Theater a lot, where something might be a little bit like, it's throwing you for a loop a little bit, but then it settles into this groove and you feel like really comfortable for a bit, and then you go out of it. So it's a cool songwriting technique as well.
Is that something that is kind of interplay in the band? Is that where Jordan might bring an idea into the songwriting process, and it's in 7/8,
right?
And you have to write a riff that originally you had a riff in mind that would work in 4/4, but 7/8 is what he wants to play it in, so you have to adjust the riff. I mean, you do that sort of.
It's a very it's a very liquid situation. Things are constantly changing, so we try not to get too like cemented in our ways with riffs that we come up with or present, because they're always going to get morphed into something else. And I think everybody is pretty generous with their the idea that it's a collective experience, and open-minded to somebody, hey, try doing it this way. We have this really weird thing that happens. It's very interesting, where somebody will present a riff, and let's say Jordan brings something in, he's playing it. This happened not too long ago at Soundcheck. Mike's playing, and then I'll start playing it, and I'll be like, okay, the one is here, and Jordan's like, what? And it's like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, this is how. And I go, Mike, play it where the one is here, and we'll play it, and then his mind will be blown, like, what? Like, I never heard it. In my mind, that was a pickup note, and the one is,
right,
whatever, three notes later, or whatever it might be. And that's kind of fun, because music is so interpretive and so subjective to how you process it and hear it. And so as far as your question, it's like, if you're open-minded to that, and you're willing to take an idea that you have and change it up and hear somebody else's input, and usually at the end you come up with something that's way better, way more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I've told students sometimes. Don't if you write a riff and you love your riff, and just because you can't count it yet,
right,
don't discount the riff,
right,
because if that's what you want to play, that's what you need to
exactly.
play.
and one of the guys in the band, John, he's probably the most likely to start playing something that's in some sort of odd time that he doesn't really realize yet.
Really?
Not because he doesn't know how to do it, but because he's just playing something that feels normal to him.
Yeah.
And we're like, what are you playing? What the hell are you playing? And he's like, I don't know, I'm just playing this. And so, a lot of times you'll like pick up on that, and you're like, that's really cool. And then start analyzing what the time signatures are. I think with Jordan and Mike, they're really quick to be able to like name it. This is in 7, goes from 7 to this, to 5 to 13, blah blah blah, and let's change it. There's like a mathematical thing going on. And myself, I'm able to kind of do that as well, like in real time. And I think one of my strong points is I could remember it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're doing that, I'll just be able to play it back, and so that we could all hear it. So everybody has their, their
no, I mean, that makes sense to me, because
yeah.
I think it's important to write what you want to write,
right,
without the constraints of 4/4.
right.
But I don't feel like writing in an odd time signature just to be technical.
Right, exactly. It all has to really stem from the music. That's been my philosophy, talking about philosophy for the longest time, when it comes to technique, songwriting, odd time signatures, scales, modes, things that you use. It's like how those are all tools to let the music inside of you come out the way you want it to come out. That's, if you just keep that headspace, then the music you write is going to be really genuine, and it won't feel forced or formulated or whatever.
Okay. Well, that being said, that kind of leads me into my next question, and that is with respect to rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
When you think back to, well, you don't even have to think back.
Mm-hmm.
Think of all current music and music we've heard. A lot of times guitar parts are relegated to really strummy things or just power chords, something very straightforward, which there's nothing wrong with.
Right.
But I think back to some of the parts you've written rhythmically. We'll use Pull Me Under.
Right.
And of course, we're filming this now, and they're on their Images and Words anniversary tour.
That's right, 25 years ago.
But I think about Pull Me Under. You've got like a shimmering arpeggio part. You've got power chords. But then you also have like single note sections.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of guitar players that write parts like that. I don't know if it's because they haven't worked it out with the band yet. And you know, if you were sitting in your practice room on your own playing a single note part, it may not sound that good.
Right.
So, I mean, how did something like that, how does your rhythmic parts, how do they come together?
Well, first of all, we can use that song as an example. I mean, any Dream Theater song, but that one as an example. I've said this before, playing the rhythm parts of the song, which comprises everything that you just mentioned, except for the solo, let's say, you know, that's 95% or higher of the song.
Yeah.
You're playing the rhythm part, you know, as a guitar player. If you're playing in a situation where there's vocals and it's not an instrumental. Maybe with my solo material, there's more lead playing. But in Dream Theater, you know, it's, like I said, high 90s% of rhythm playing. And before I answer your question, one of the things that's really important, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges, especially in preparing for a tour where you're playing a 3-hour show, is stamina. Is being able to have your hand in that position on the guitar and be, you know, playing sometimes very technical rhythm parts that take a lot of like muting and, you know, quick bursts of notes or passages that go on for a while. That stamina part is one of the biggest challenges. And, you know, it's something that guitar players shouldn't take for granted. And you kind of only realize if you are performing a lot. You know, if you're a performing musician, you get up on stage and you realize a half hour into it, oh man, it's really hard. My hand is cramping.
Oh yeah.
So that's a big part of it. But I mean, as far as like mixing elements of clean sections, single note sections, you know, power chords, whatever, it's all, I look at it as like orchestration. It's how is the song, you know, going back to this thing about let the music really guide what you're doing. So it's like, how is a song moving along? What does it need right now? You know, does it need to open up and be really big and glorious, or does it need to do the opposite and kind of like really choke down? And sometimes some of those single note parts will you know, benefit sections where you want it to sort of close up a little bit more. And even with your technique as you're playing, you know, if you're playing a single note part and you're, not that anybody can hear this, and you're muting it, you know, and you play it differently to where you're really letting those notes ring out, you know, all that kind of thing changes the dynamics of the song.
Yeah.
You know, it makes the song like have this ebb and flow and create, you know, dynamic sections. So to answer your question, I think the single note stuff, it really is driven by what's happening in that particular point in the song.
Yeah.
You know, that makes sense. You know, and what I try to do is mix it up in a way where the song always sounds interesting. So it's not too much of the same thing for too long.
Yeah, well, it provides that dynamic
right.
That a song needs to breathe.
Right.
And
right.
we don't think about single notes as a rhythmic idea, but they are.
They are a rhythmic idea. I think it's the second verse in Pull Me Under or so, where it does this sort of climbing thing. That's all single note, and what it's doing is it's, you know, it's in unison with the bass as chords underneath it creating the harmony, but it's sort of building and climbing and getting to a point where then the song opens up to the chorus, which is big ringing chords. So it's a dynamic technique. It's an orchestrational technique. You know, think about classical music. Think about the way that music breathes and tightens up or builds or explodes into something really, really big. That's what I'm doing. That's how I'm approaching it. And it's all in influence of, like, you know, listening to a lot of Rush and
Oh yeah.
Yes, and all that stuff.
But I was going back and listening to Pull Me Under, and I was
Mhm.
thinking, man, a lot of the songs that I listen to, they're just so many power chords and so many,
Mhm.
just where the guitar player is strumming
Right.
98% of the time,
Right, right.
and they're not changing things up very much.
I find that kind of boring
So
as not only as a guitar player, but as a writer. I find that boring. Like I want to listen to a song and have it like, go through all these sort of twists and turns and keep the listener um, engaged.
yeah,
It'd be
right.
like watching a movie and the scene never changes. It's like, oh my God, it's dragging on. So, I mean, that's kind of part of like playing progressive music
Yeah.
is that there's no real way to do it or not do it. You can just make any decision at any point during a
Well,
song.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
think I think that is a song like that, for
yeah,
example, "Pull Me Under," would be a great song for somebody to learn,
right.
just to kind of digest the idea of changing things up that
Sure.
much.
Yeah, it changes constantly.
Yeah.
There's the only consistent probably section of the song is the chorus. But section to section, verse to verse, they're all different. I'm playing something differently every time.
And you have all these awesome guitar solos and things that you do at your concerts and on your albums, but the outro on "Pull Me Under"
Yeah.
is probably my favorite section of any song that you guys have ever
Oh,
done,
cool.
because you have the hand of death going
Right,
there.
right, right, right.
That's the
Yeah,
metal crunch we want to hear,
yeah, yeah.
And that's hard to pull off
It is hard to
properly.
pull off. Yeah, that technique, where you're muting down, you're making those notes real tight. I mean, there's a couple of things that go into that. One of the big things is the sound.
Yeah,
If you have the wrong kind of sound, it's not going to sound like that.
right.
So you need, I mean, first of all, that's a boogie thing all the way, to get that kind of like real tight thing. But it's not only technique of muting the strings, but you have to have an overdriven sound that's not too overdriven where the notes get all soggy.
Yeah,
They have to like stop on a dime and have that chunk. And you have to prevent the other strings that you're not playing from ringing out and be really locked in with the drums. So yeah, I mean that is an influence of listening to Metallica, because I
right.
feel like that's like such a head field
Exactly.
technique.
Oh yeah.
And you hear that in Metropolis, those kind of rhythmic
Hmm.
things that are muted and tight, where the guitar sound is very, you know, uh, it's very solid and doesn't have any spillover.
Hmm.
You hit a note, go, and it just like stops. That's the kind of sound you need.
So, kind of segueing from rhythm into melody.
Yeah.
Do you write most of the melodies, correct?
Yeah, what we try to do is as we're writing the music, and we know a section is a vocal section, because we do differentiate, like, oh, this is instrumental, this is vocal. We kind of know as we're writing. A lot of those melodies kind of come out as we're writing them. They're either there's somewhere in the chord voicing, maybe Jordan will put that on top and that'll be a sample
Okay.
melody, or as we're playing, I'll start to play a melody over it and something will like pop in, or I'm hearing a vocal melody and I'll lay that down somewhere so that I have it. But I would say that it's sort of happening simultaneously
Okay.
as the music. It's not like this afterthought, like let me come up with a melody. It's sort of like
Well,
it's
I was
always
thinking the other way. I was
in there.
wondering if you have a melody in mind, and
Hmm.
then you create a song
Sometimes,
as the bass.
sometimes, yeah, like a song like Damage Control.
Okay.
Um, there's like this kind of D. I don't know if you'd call it the chorus, but I had that sort of melody idea
Okay.
and then formed that around that. So that does sometimes happen for sure. It'll hit
It's
you.
probably a harder way to do it, I would assume.
It depends. It kind of hits you. A lot of like the astonishing writing for me as I was writing the story, literally writing the story and thinking about scenes, melodies would pop in my head and I would sing those, and I'd only have a melody, but a lot of those melodies became some of the themes. Um, so I guess it really depends. It depends on like where your head is at, and you know, at a particular moment, whether you're writing together, whether you're by yourself, where there's something hits you away from an instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the melodic part is always there. It's always, even I've said this before too. Even in playing solo, even if the solo is going by quickly, if you break it down and slow it down, like there is a melody that's going by at every point.
Yeah.
At every point, there's always a melody, that's driving what's going on.
Okay, well, that's interesting
Yeah.
about the way you create it together as a band, though.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about the parts that Jordan's laying down, kind of influencing the melody there, but that makes sense, obviously.
Yeah, if he's playing a chord progression, he'll put the top voice and he'll start playing a melody within it, even when we demo songs, and you'll hear that. And sometimes that turns into the vocal melody or guides the vocal melody. Sometimes it's just a counter line that's there that creates some orchestration. But one of the fun things that I love to do when we're writing and doing that is I'll abandon the whole rhythm thing and I'll just play over it.
Okay.
It sounds self-indulgent and selfish, but I'll start bringing out the melodies that way.
Okay.
And we'll do that. And a lot of times those melodies stick, and they either become, a lot of times in our music there'll be some guitar melody that's carrying a section.
Mm-hmm.
It'll become that, or it'll be the basis of a vocal melody.
Okay.
And then there is, to be fair, there is a point where once all that's done, and now it's lyric writing time, where you do hone in more specifically on an exact melody for the section.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is that sort of writing of melodies specifically for the vocal parts.
Okay.
But a lot of the seeds, a lot of the guides, the blueprints, and sometimes the actual melodies happen at the moment
The whole band is working together.
inception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. It drives it.
So I did get a couple of questions from some other people. I won't necessarily name them, but
Okay.
I got a couple of questions from some players you know.
Okay.
And one was, given how much you're on the road playing the same show, almost the same show every night.
Yeah.
How in the world do you find inspiration
Mm-hmm.
to start writing new material, because you're just consumed with performing what you're doing and on the road and not a lot of time to I guess put scratch tracks down of new ideas and things like that. I mean, what do you do for that?
There's a couple different things. As far as like playing the show and performing, whether the show is the same or changing slightly, I never lose the excitement of that experience. I'm always so looking forward to that moment. It's the best part of the day, and the challenge of being able to try to play better than you did the night before, and looking out and seeing new people, and they're there for the first time, and it's a new experience for them, so you want to make it special. So that feeling of performing never gets old. It's always inspiring. But as far as being creative while traveling, while being on the road, a couple of different things happen. Oftentimes at sound checks, we will just start jamming on an idea. Maybe somebody had something that they wanted to share, and hey guys, check this out. Or something happens organically, and we just start to play. And we always have it recorded. We're always recording, and we archive that stuff. And then we'll go back when we go in to write a record, an album,
Record a record.
Yes, a tape. No, when we go in to write, we'll look at that sort of library of ideas and say, oh, remember we were jamming on this in Seoul, Korea. Remember, what was that idea? And we'll look back, and that's really cool. So we'll have these ideas that we collect. That's as a group we do that. As far as writing individually, it depends, on when it hits you. It might be something. A lot of times I'll be backstage warming up, and I'll start to play something, and it's like, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. And immediately I have my iPhone there, and I just put it down right away. So I have my own collection of ideas. And it's not so much, I've never really been one. I've done this out of necessity, where I had to get some sort of project done, and I'm in my hotel room on days off with headphones and a computer and trying to get something demoed. But it's less of that and more of just capturing these little snippets, little moments of inspiration. Like that was a really cool riff. That'll be, awesome. You don't want to forget it, and you record
I don't think
it.
you can discount that.
Yeah.
That
No,
that
a lot of
little
that's
30-second idea you come
Yeah.
up with, you got to put down.
absolutely, and a lot of that stuff ends up being uh, the inspiration for a song or a part.
Oh yeah.
And so that's how a lot of the creativity happens. So less, it's less like recording actual, usable tracks, and more of just getting ideas down.
Right.
I find the travel and the daily schedule is a little bit too hectic. I know there are guys that are really comfortable doing that, and they have their laptop and an interface, and they could do a whole solo album. I wish I was one of those guys. But yeah, it's more just like laying down little seeds.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I mean, given how busy you are on the road, how are you finding, new music or new players that you want to listen to?
I sort of let that stuff happen naturally. I don't particularly go out and try to find people and, scour the internet, or, you know, go out actively looking for new releases. I kind of let it just happen, where somebody, hey, you ever hear this guy? I was listening to this. You should check this out. And I find like the best moments happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you sort of naturally get turned on to a different player, or that word of mouth thing I think is really cool. And I've sort of always been that way. If I hear something, if I'm in a situation and something is playing in the back, what is that? Or maybe I'm watching television or something, and something comes up, and I like when things hit me naturally. I've never been one to go out and,
Right. Well, I know you're
browse.
given a ton of music.
Yeah.
So-
It's I am given a ton of music, and sometimes
It's hard
that
to hear all that.
yeah, it's hard to hear out that all of that, and sometimes it works out that you'll hear something. Hey, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to be sort of naturally turned on to music, um, sort of situationally, and word of mouth, and by friends, and
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of head towards the finish line here with
Yeah.
a couple of hopefully fun questions.
Okay.
I was thinking of this because of you and your band specifically.
Yeah.
Moments in time that
Mhm.
you remember, because I know you've referenced your musical inspirations before in a lot
Mhm.
of interviews, but I think back to when moments in my past where I specifically remember hearing that one song or the
Yeah.
one riff,
Sure.
and I think back to when I heard Queen
Mm-hmm.
the first time, when I first heard Eruption,
Yeah.
Ingve, but I remember living in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
and all I had in my apartment was a stereo system,
Yeah.
a mattress, and a table.
Perfect.
But on that stereo,
Yeah.
Pull Me Under came on.
Oh wow.
And I remember diving towards the stereo, throwing a cassette in,
Uh-huh.
and hitting record,
Oh, that's
so I
awesome.
could figure out who you were.
Right.
Right? So that's how I found you, bought the album immediately, and wore it out. But I think moments like that are really cool.
They're very, very
Happened
cool.
again later in the 90s,
Yeah.
like with Meshuggah. The
Yeah.
first time I heard that on the radio, I was just floored.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
What
I don't
the
know.
hell is
You have
this?
moments like that?
I have so many moments like that. This is kind of embarrassing to admit, but the first time I heard Stevie Ray Vaughan on the radio, he was playing Voodoo Child, and I didn't know the Hendrix version. Sorry. And I was like, oh my God, like, who the hell is this? And I remember listening to it, like, that's the most ridiculous guitar playing I've ever heard. And, and then really getting into Stevie Ray and figuring out that was a Hendrix song he was doing a version of. But anyway, that was definitely one of those moments. I remember where I was. I remember like, oh my God. I had a similar situation with Eruption, because who hasn't? You hear that and you're like, what the hell was that? You can't even like fathom that it's a guitar when you're young, and maybe you haven't been playing that long, and you're listening. You don't know you don't know anything about technique. You don't know what's going on. Hearing Rush for the first time, that was a big one. Yeah, there's so many moments like that just stand out. They're like kind of just, they're stamped in my memory, like that first time.
Yeah, I
hearing
love
something.
those nostalgic moments, because it makes like going to tonight's concert, it makes that all the better
And
when you play that song.
and I realized that, because I grew up loving music, discovering the guitar, and that opening up a whole world of bands, guitar players, going to concerts, listening to music, and all that stuff kind of contributes to my own memories and brings me back to what was happening at those times in my life.
Yeah.
I remember hearing Master of Puppets for the first time. I was at Berkeley and was like blown away by the sound and the playing and everything. And so, for a lot of people, when you hear music, that when you hear music later on that you discovered at a certain point in your life, maybe it was a pivotal point in your life, maybe something was going on, it has so much more meaning.
Yeah.
And so I realized that, when we play some of these songs came out 25 years ago. And like you said, you might have heard Pull Me Under on the radio for the first time, got the record, becomes part of the fabric of your life and your memories.
Oh, yeah.
And so when we play it, I understand the relationship between music and people. And I think that's what makes it so much fun, and you look out and you see people smiling and singing, and, it's a great feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly here, we want to wrap up with some bold predictions.
Okay. All right.
How many days we have left? I should know this, but The Last Jedi is coming out very, very soon on the 15th of December.
Okay.
Any predictions? What's going to happen with Rey? Or do you think Luke is going to be more powerful than Yoda?
You know what? First of all, I can't wait. And the last couple of movies I thought were awesome. And Rogue One I loved too. I was like,
oh yeah,
that was so awesome.
well done.
So, going into those movies, and this is something that I like to do, I kind of like to be surprised and not speculate too much,
I want to be surprised, so I'm not going to look on social media for things like that and spoilers, but there are things I want to see. I want to see Luke stop a Star Destroyer with the Force.
Right. But I wonder, it's so weird because we're seeing him for the first time in so long, and he's so isolated, and he's all Mr. Homeless guy up there. I don't know. Does he have it in him? Does he have it in him? I guess we'll find out. This might be equally as important, but what's going to happen in the final few seasons of Game of Thrones? That is on my mind.